After studying this module, you shall be able to know more about reveal preference methods, particularly use of travel cost methods for measuring economic value of an environmental resource. Know about types of values which are yielded by environmental resources to evolve economic criteria of managing environmental resources. Learn about TCM methods and a simple model to infer individuals' willingness to pay for an environmental resource by analyzing the expense they incur on a recreational site access. Also, learn about preparing a survey instrument to gather information from visitors on important variables. Know to create a database that is required to analyze TCM models such as zonal travel cost method, individual travel cost method, and random utility maximization method. Application of econometric techniques for each of the above methods for determining a monetary value which reveals people's willingness to pay for a certain quality of an environmental resource. After evaluating the merits, limitations, and issues of TCM, a suitable policy may be evolved to improve, protect, and or have alternative options of the resource under consideration. Let us now start with the module. Various techniques have been developed to value environmental resources. These techniques are broadly classified into two groups, direct and indirect. The direct method basically involves contingent valuation method. In CVM survey, each individual would directly elicit a unique willingness to pay amount in response to the question, what price would you be willing to pay for preserving a certain quality of a certain environmental resource. Indirect methods infer people's demand for non-market goods through their preferences which they reveal through their purchases in markets. The advantage of reveal preference technique is that we know that certain amount of money have actually been spent which is revealed by their choices in the market. Travel cost method of measuring environmental benefits is one of the indirect methods of behavioral linkage approach. This method was first developed by Hotling. The TCM has been used to value a recreational experience in general and water recreation in particular. It measures monetary value that people would be willing to pay for availing the recreational amenities provided by nature's bountiful resources such as water, wilderness area, or a national park. The variation in WTP amount would depend on the benefits each individual expects to derive from the consumption of the public good in question. Now, we shall discuss different types of values. Economic criteria of environmental resource management from purely conceptual point of view. It is generally recognized that society derives utility from environmental resources through sources of values, which have been broadly classified as use values and non-use values. Use values are classified as direct use values, indirect use values, and option values. Non-use values are classified as existence values and bequest values. Thus, use values refer to the benefits received by individuals from directly using an environmental resource. For example, direct utility is obtained by swimming experience in a lake, while non-use values refer to the benefits received by individuals indirectly from the existence and bequest values of a resource. Existence value is defined as the utility or benefit received from an environmental good simply through its continuance as a good or service. For example, people value such resources as great rainforests, white elephant, or Grand Canyon. Bequest values of a resource arise both from a sense of obligation to preserve the environment for future generation and from the recognition of the intrinsic value of natural resource. Economic criteria of environmental resource management are guided by people's choices for these types of values, particularly that of use values. People express their preferences for environmental goods either directly or indirectly through market choices. Economists use this data base to determine the demand for non-market goods and provide inputs to government to evolve policies to preserve these resources. Thus, recognizing how society can value an environmental resource it is important to identify the social benefits of a policy proposal. Policy makers, for example, while evaluating the prospects of improving a recreational site, are more concerned with the direct on-site recreational benefits which accrue to the site users. However, there are other benefits too which accrue to the site managers. For example, excess cost to the site is a monetary gain to the maintenance or managing agency. Government receives net income from the on-site visitors' expenditures. Present study considers explaining the TCM to quantify direct recreational benefits received by on-site users. Now we will discuss different total cost methods. Travel cost method. TCM is used to estimate economic use values connected with environmental goods and services that are used for recreation or historic site. It measures changes in the quality of an environmental resource by evaluating the effect of that change on the demand for a complementary good. Simple observation suggests that the demand for the recreational use of an environmental resource such as a lake or a national forest increases as its quality improves. Clausen and Nash first developed empirical models on the premise that the cost incurred by the visitors can be used to develop a measure of recreational value of the site visited. The TCM has been used to estimate total values and or to estimate values per day. The travel cost method is based on individual data or zonal averages. For the ZTCM, the average travel cost of zones and the average participation rate of a zone is used. The ITCM and the ZTCM are well established methods for the valuation of recreational activities such as angling. The scope of the method depends on its application for estimating economic benefits or costs resulting from change in environmental quality of a recreational site as is perceived by the on-site users. Total valuation of a new or existing site, prediction of trip frequency and policy changes in both trip frequency and in monetary terms. Elimination of an existing recreational site due to deterioration in its own quality or more availability of substitute sites. Changes in excess costs, for example, entrance fee, travel costs for a recreational site. The assumptions on which TCM method are based are as follows. Individuals visit a site if the benefit from the visit is at least as large as the costs. People make changes in their visitation rates according to changes in costs. For example, changes in entrance fee will have the same effect as changes in travel costs. The demand depends on the quality of the site, which also helps deriving the WTP for a change in the attributes. On-site survey provides opportunities for large sample sizes as visitors tend to be interested in participating. TCM uses information about people's actual travel costs to determine their WTP and the relevant demand curve. It refers to the cost of time and travel incurred by people to reach a recreational site. Travel cost method employs a survey technique to obtain these costs. Visitors are interviewed on site to provide information on the cost paid for travel, entry fee, on site expenditure, expense incurred to visit other sites. Information on socio-economic characteristics such as age, income, other sites, length of visit, visited, and any other variable which affect the demand for the site is also gathered from the visitors. Then a database is created and analyzed to estimate the demand function. Thus, travel costs represent an implicit price of site access which is used to determine the demand for recreational amenities provided by a natural resource. It is same as to estimating people's willingness to pay for a market good based on the quantity of a good demanded at different prices. TCM model, a simple TCM model can be defined as V is the function of TC and X, where V is the visit to the site, TC is the cost of visit, and X is the socio-economic variables. Variants of TCM. There are three variants of TCM: zonal travel cost method, individual travel cost method, and random utility method. Zonal travel cost method. To calculate the economic benefit of a recreational site using ZTCM, the zonal demand function for the site is estimated. This is usually done by following steps given below. First, identify a recreational site and zones surrounding it. Zones may be identified by geographic divisions such as metropolitan areas surrounding the site at different distances. Second, conduct the survey using both existing records of data, secondary data, and specially designed questionnaire. The questionnaire should consist of questions to investigate origin of visitors, mode of transport, travel costs, individuals, socio-economic features, and any other attributes that affect the demand for the site. Third, number of visits to the site in a period of 1 year, usually made in the previous year. Fourth, subdivision of visitors' origins into zones of increasing distance. The travel and time costs both increase with distance. Therefore, the number of visits originating from different zones indicate visits purchased at different prices. Fifth, calculate visitation rates per 1000 population in each zone by dividing the total visits per year from the zone by the zone's population in thousands. To estimate travel costs per trip, calculate the average round trip travel distance and travel time to the site for each zone. Sixth, using a regression analysis, the equation that relates visits per capita to travel costs and socio-economic variables estimate the demand function and average visitor consumer surplus by zone. Seventh, calculate the consumer surplus or the area under the demand curve by estimating the total economic benefit of the site to visitors. Thus, using the data from each zone, a demand curve is derived and the consumer surplus is calculated to assess the economic benefit derived by individuals from the site. Mathematically, the demand function for a given recreational site from zone Z may be defined from the above equation as Vz divided by Pi is the function of Tciz xi, where Vz is the total number of visits by people from zone Z to the recreational site. Pi is the population of zone Z. Vz by Pi is the visitor rate and Xj is the socio-economic characteristics of the zone Z. Assuming that the above relationship is a linear one, the V by P is equal to A plus B T C. Per person average consumer surplus in each zone for all visits to the site in a period of time may be calculated by integrating the linear equation between the cost of visits and the price at which visitor rate is 0, the choke price. For example, out of many zones, the ACS for zone 1 would be as follows: ACS is equal to TC1 to CP into A plus BTC into TTC. Annual total consumer surplus is estimated by multiplying ACS by population of the zone. Cumulating the annual zone consumer surplus across all zones provides an estimate of total CS per annum for the whole recreational experience of site visit. Now, we will discuss the individual travel cost method. The individual travel cost approach is similar to the ZTCM approach. However, it differs in how it collects the information for analysis. ITCM method gathers information from individual visitors rather than simply collecting data on number of visitors and their distances. The collected data are used in statistical analysis to estimate the economic benefit of the recreational site. The steps to be followed for conducting the survey and creating a relevant database for estimation of the demand function for a recreational site are as follows. First, identify a recreational site. Second, design a questionnaire that consists of questions on dependent and explanatory variables required for the valuation. Third, questionnaire should clearly explain the purpose of the survey at the beginning of the interview so that good to be valued is well understood by its users. Fourth, to collect information on the main features of the visit, visitors should be asked about the location of their residence or origin, how many times they visited the site in the previous year or season, the length of the trip, travel costs, and the number of hours spent at the site. Socio-economic characteristic of visitors such as age, education, income, etc. Fifth, individual's income or any other information on the value of their time. Sixth, whether individuals have visited other sites during the same trip, how much time they spent at each of those sites. Seventh, what are the motives of visiting this site? Activities carried out on the site like games, walk, cycling, etc. Eighth, how do individuals perceive the environmental quality of the recreational site? Ninth, possible substitutes sites instead of this site. Given the characteristics of the goods and services valued, the most recommended technique of conducting the survey is on-site face-to-face interviews. A random sample of visitors during the peak season may be taken as representative of the total visits undertaken in 1 year. Using the survey data into regression analysis, a relationship between the number of visits and travel costs and socio-economic variables can be estimated. The estimated regression equation yields a demand function of the average visitor to the site. The area under this demand curve gives the average consumer surplus, which is when multiplied by the total relevant population provides an estimate of the total consumer surplus for the site. Since information on environmental quality of the site is collected, the change in consumer surplus can be estimated if the environmental quality of the site changes. The change in CS is obtained by estimating two different demand curves, one for each level of quality, and the area between these two curves shows the estimate of the change in consumer surplus. Using the demand equation, the annual consumer surplus for individual I can be calculated as has been shown here. The total consumer surplus can be estimated by multiplying the individual annual consumer surplus by the number of individuals visiting the site. Now, we will discuss random utility maximization method. Random utility maximization method is more sophisticated one, as unlike ITCM, it captures those economic values of recreational sites which occur due to specific characteristics or changes in its quality, rather than for the site as a whole. For example, an agency may be required to value the economic losses or benefits from a decrease or increase in fish population, rather than from loss or benefit of the entire fish stock. The random utility approach may be the best technique to apply because it focuses on choices among alternative sites which have different quality characteristics. The RUM assumes that out of all the possible fishing sites, individuals pick the one that they prefer the most. Individuals make trade-offs between site quality and the price of travel to the site, which results in a change in consumer surplus. The RUM method measures the economic benefit which occurs due to a change in the consumer surplus. In earlier two methods, the total consumer surplus is derived from having an access to the recreational site. Though a change in the number of visits due to the change in the water quality of the site can be measured, the entire fish stock will still remain the same for all the visitors. Since there is no variation, it is not possible to determine how quality affects the demand for trips to the recreational area. Unlike the ITCM, the RUM models the probability of visiting a site. Further, the demand for a recreational site is affected not only by its own quality but also by the qualities of substitute sites. Data from both the actual trip and previous trips are collected. In contrast to the ITCM model, RUM models may include a large number of substitute sites. The RUM uses substitute sites qualities as demand determining factors to estimate the demand function for a recreational site, whereas ITCM methods are not equipped to do so. The quality attributes of the site, the distances to the site, and the substitutes have to be identified. Therefore, the data collection for the RUM is more demanding. The RUM method requires interview questions to relate to the quality features of the sites chosen for visits, the travel costs to each site, how many trips were taken over the last year, the distance to each site, and other information similar to individual travel cost survey. RUM focuses on nested models where the individual's choice is made sequentially to have independence from irrelevant alternatives. In the first nest, an individual chooses between fishing and other recreational activities. At the next level, he chooses a fishing site. The empirical results may be sensitive to the choice of nesting structure. Other issues connected to TCM include on-site sampling. Let us now discuss different merits of TCM. First, TCM is based on people's actual behavior rather than stated willingness to pay. Second, participation in recreational activities and site visits revealed people's demand for the resources amenity services. Third, ZTCM and ITCM are relatively inexpensive, though RUM is relatively more demanding. It uses prices from the surrogate market to assess the recreational use values of resources and environment. On-site surveys provide prospects for large sample sizes as visitors tend to be interested in participating. Fourth, a linear demand function is estimated directly as a function of trip costs and other variables that may affect the number of visits to the site. Let us now discuss limitations and issues of TCM. First, one of the limitations of indirect methods of valuing environmental goods is that those values which do not leave any trace in the market cannot be measured. For example, existence values, also known as passive use values. TCM is one of these methods. it estimates only user values. Non-user values are not measured by TCM and therefore are undervalued. Second, TCM is ineffective for estimating benefits that accrue to commercial users of a resource because it mainly focuses on valuing the recreational use of the resource, particularly that of an improvement of water bodies. Third, TCM estimates are sensitive to the site under consideration. Fourth, the TCM models assume that individual trip itinerary is specific to the recreational site. Thus, if a trip has more than one purpose, the value of the site may be overestimated. It can be difficult to apportion the travel costs among the various purposes. Fifth, the TCM assumes that people perceive and respond to changes in travel costs the same way that they would respond to changes in admission price. Sixth, defining and measuring the opportunity cost of time is difficult. Travel time has an opportunity cost as it could be used performing some other activities. This cost may be added to the TC or the value of the site is underestimated. Availability of substitute sites can affect values. For example, if two people visit the same site, their travel cost should be the same. But if one person has more substitute sites and prefers visiting this site, he attaches higher value to the site. There can be situations where people have low travel cost but high value for the site and therefore choose to stay in a nearby area. RUM estimates such values but is not estimated by ITCM. In eighth, interviewing visitors on site can introduce sampling biases to the analysis. Ninth, to estimate the demand function, there should be sufficient difference between distances travelled to affect travel costs. Also, the travel costs should differ to affect the number of trips made. Thus, if sites are near major population centers where many visitations may be from origin zones that are quite close to one another, the travel cost methods are not well suited. Now let us discuss some of the policy challenges. The policy challenges before the government or environmental agency based on the findings of TCM are whether to protect, improve or have some other use of the resource which can yield better value. The theoretical aspect of the TCM technique in general concerns with assessing the benefit cost values of an environmental resource, but managing agencies and the state governments must be caring for the income generated by various activities of site visitors. However, much would depend on the allocation of property right. One application of TCM is to assess whether a recreational site that is publicly owned has a greater total use value than a government proposed agricultural, urban or industrial development usage of the site. Let us now summarize what we have discussed in this module. TCM is a useful tool of estimating economic benefits, cost of use values of non-market environmental good. Extensive data are collected on site from the visitors to estimate uncompensated demand curve and the consumer surplus. Its best application is for the well-defined recreational sites and well-perceived environmental attributes. Change in demand due to quality changes of the site and the availability of substitute sites are well analyzed by more advanced technical tools such as random utility maximization method of TCM. Policy formulation remains a challenging task for the government as it has to decide about the appropriate usage of an environmental resource, particularly its contribution to economic gain to the society.